Alright, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Little Man Big Conversations. I'm, of course, the Little Man, aka Flashman, aka James, welcoming you back to another episode. Continuing on with our conversation with Josh Ives, IPW Impact Pro Wrestling Australia owner, also known as the wrestler R.I.P. Last week, for those that weren't listening last week, we chatted to Josh about his start in pro wrestling, how we ended up setting each other on fire. Yes, it actually happened. And what led to him going from being a member of the locker room to owning one of the longest wrestling federations in Queensland history. So here we go, part 2, we pick it up with Josh. So at this point, you're saying that your kids are now at the show. They're starting to watch it just like you were many, many moons ago. But hey, the transitional period's happening for you now. Hawk's still going through the sort of phase of, it's not mine anymore, but I'm missing it, but I know it's the right thing to do, but you know, it's a very tough time, I guess, for everyone, because you're learning the ropes and he's learning to not be in charge of the business anymore. What's your personal life like at this point? Is that starting to be a factor into the fact that you're now running the company, or is life sort of allowing this transition to happen as smooth as possible?
Well, I think firstly, Pete was very helpful, in terms of, running a new business and stuff, like insurance wise and all sorts of things, copywriting and all that. He was very helpful. And, but you could just see it was hurting him. And, it did put a bit of a strain on our relationship because, we were trying to do these new things, and Pete was very much in the old way, that was his mindset, was the old school sort of mindset. And so he didn't understand a lot of the choices I was making, because I had guys who were smaller and I was elevating them on my card and stuff like that. And he just couldn't understand that. He was more into the bigger guys, like Scorn, myself, people like that.
Yeah.
So that put a little bit of a strain, but at the end of the day, we were really close, and we're both hot-headed, so we were able to call each other out on our bullshit, which is great. But yeah, at the same time, I had a little, how old was she been? So my first was born in 2013, so she was about 2 at this time, and she was already starting to enjoy watching the wrestling and stuff. And so, it was hard juggling all that and having a kid. And then going from that to also, I was actually changing jobs. I was leaving one job I worked in for 6 years and moving on to another. So there was that transitional period too. So it was all very overwhelming.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know the locker room were just great. When the transition, I had to look, I'll be honest, I had to sit a few people down and say, look, I'm going to be changing how we're doing things. I don't really want to go with this angle for your character right now. And, a lot of people were frustrated with that. And so I changed a lot of people's positions on the card and all that sort of stuff. So people did leave, I'll be honest. They did leave because especially some of the older guys who weren't really involved anymore anyway, but they were coming in regularly just to do their quick appearance and leave. But I was trying to push the athleticism a bit more. And because they were taking a bit of a back seat and not doing these main events all the time, a group of people left. And that is fine, because I completely understand where they're coming from. It's a change of perspective to the business, and not everyone's going to like it. But at the end of the day, most of the guys all stuck by me. I think 3 people left, and but other than that, it was a really good transition. I had a lot of guys really look after me and watch my back, sort of thing. And there were some people that I had to teach how to put up the ring, and then left them with the responsibility of being there every time I got to set up the ring, so then I can rely on them. And those sort of people are what keeps a wrestling business running, Yeah. And it was really comforting knowing that I had those group of guys, and I'll forever hold a lot of love for them, because I owe them one because they did really look after us. But I think the hardest thing of it all was, financially, it is taxing.
Yeah.
Running a wrestling business. And when you're in a relationship and you have a kid and all this sort of stuff, it's very hard to juggle. And that's where I take my hat off to Taryn, my wife, because she knew that this is a passion of mine, and she knew that I'd be lost if I didn't have IPW. And so she took it on the chin and tried to take over and help me with the transition. And so she ended up taking care of DVDs, the website, editing, our posters. She taught herself how to do Photoshop and editing on videos, and she was just an all-round miracle, because she also took on the responsibility of the canteen and stocking and budgeting, and she was just incredible. And it became really stressful at times. Yeah. But she kept going and kept helping me, and now, we started to really gain a bit of momentum. And anyway, about 6 months after I've taken over, the crowd numbers go from about 60 to 80 people, and they're now up in the 200s, which is great. It was a huge improvement. And then a year after that, we got a crowd where we had 440 something people in the hall, which is a huge number, especially for indie wrestling. So we were so happy with that. And then the huge crowds just kept coming, which I actually narrow that down to the roster, helping promote the shows, handing out flyers and doing all that stuff, to Taryn also, working her ass off with promotions and different ways to do things. And yeah. And I think with Pete out of the business now, at that time anyway, like he was really happy for me, which I think is really nice, that he was really happy that things are going well, which would have been hard. But yeah.
So was it, taking it back real quick to where the transition period happened, you had to sit a couple of guys down. That process in itself, I mean, I know the kind of people that are in this industry where you kind of have to sit them down and go, hey, this isn't what you're thinking it needs to be, but it needs to be this, and this, and this. But you've always been pretty much a business first kind of guy. But you got to wonder, and I'm wondering this, when those select few, and I don't know who they are, but you mentioned that the select few decided, no, I'm out of here, adios. Did you feel like was that taken personally by you? Because, there's guys that have been there, for as long as the day is long, but did you feel like that was a personal thing when they went, no, I'm out of here? Or were you thinking, okay, business is business?
The guys who left, out of, I think, the 3 guys who are on our shows who left, only one of them was what I would refer to as a soldier. And so a soldier is, live by the business, by the company name, and die by the business sort of thing. Very loyal to Pete. And there was a bit of honor about it. You know what I mean? And that one person leaving, that hurt a little bit. But at the end of the day, I understood where he was coming from as well.
Right.
But I think it was actually down to a lot of his own insecurities, because he was an older wrestler and, times are changing. But at the end of the day, we still made up 6 months later. So, but the other 2, they were guys who just came in and were just part of the furniture, but they didn't really contribute to helping at all. And a lot of it come down to, hey, look, guys, I need you to give me a hand here. And, and also, like, I can't book you this way all the time. We got to change things around. And from the get-go, they weren't happy with it. And these weren't people who were IPW loyalists. So I wasn't fussed if they got upset and left, because I knew what their intentions were, and it was just to look after themselves. And I completely understand that. It's a dog-eat-dog world. But as a business owner, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm looking at the whole picture. Right. And Yeah, because I consider the group of guys that we have, we're family, and we all need to be given a certain platform to display our abilities, you know? Pete was all about giving people a chance. And
Yeah.
I think that was Pete's best quality, was giving the underdog a place in wrestling. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, speaking firsthand from wanting a place in wrestling to, I guess, as you said, an underdog, yeah, he was very much a see through the BS kind of guy, but he was also one, if you were struggling with, like, say, social anxiety, like you weren't the biggest confident person, not only within yourself, but I guess talking to strangers, man, he had a way of channeling into that inner demon, slapping it out of you, and making you perform to the best of your ability that he know you that you could do.
Yeah.
He found that with me, like I was sort of feeling really uneasy, and again, no one made me feel like this except myself. But I was feeling at that point, man, am I insulting people being down here? Like I really, I was at the one time when I really sort of second guessed my height. Being around, guys of a bigger nature. But, Pete was like, man, no, that's not important here. What's important is, yeah, he's a smaller dude, and as he liked to say, he's 4 stone ringing wet. I think what he used to call me.
Shit.
But he used to always say, he's like, hey, this guy has got a big personality. And he goes,
Yeah.
that's what I find interesting. And then, I did the impressions and things like that to start off my career, and, he loved it. But, yeah, he was always good like that to a lot of the guys. There was a lot of guys that came through there that started off real in their shell, like even trying to shake their hand or say, how you going? Oh, yeah, good, good. Like it was very much a, wow, is there anyone home? Like, is this...
He would give... Do you remember Ayla? I'll say her name, Ayla. Do you remember Ayla? So she was this girl who was the sister of a wrestler, and she could play the guitar really well. And she'd sing songs like Taylor Swift sort of style songs, but even softer, like really calming music. But he saw a talent in her playing the guitar, and he thought, oh, look, she's really battling with her confidence at the moment. Maybe we should put her on the show. And everyone looked at him like, what the hell? But he just wanted to give her a chance. So she would be in the ring, sitting on a chair playing the guitar, singing these really wholesome, soft songs before the show, and the whole crowd was suffering because of it, because it was just so calming. No one was getting pumped for the show. But that was when his heart got in the way, because he was just trying to look after the underdog,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's Pete all over, is looking after the underdog and giving everyone a chance.
Yeah, he was. He even if it cost him either financially or if the business suffered in some sort of way that was unforeseen, it didn't matter to Pete, because he'd always find a way to bounce back. He always knew that, hey, this will pay off in the long run, and that's just something that he always strove by. He wasn't afraid of taking the hits, quite literally taking on the chin in some instances and recovering, a show or two later, and making people realize that the people that acted out so negatively to the initial change 2 months later were the ones knocking on his door going, you were right, I'm sorry. And
exactly.
That's something that I've always remembered that he would do, not only for myself, but a lot of guys down there. But speaking of yourself, because he always, kept an eye out on you in more ways than one at this point. The transitional periods happening, he's over time, he's learned to accept it. Guys, down there are saying, yes, we want to stay. Some are going, no, thank you. You're starting to get the crowd numbers back up. It's around this time now where there's probably about a year or so under your belt at this point, and a lot of other companies start popping up all over the map. And there's generated interest with guys wanting to work other shows, other companies. At this point in time, given the history of that company, there was always a closed door policy. It was a case of, you stay here, you wrestle here, that's how it is because you trained here. That was the kind of vibe. And that's a very old school mentality vibe to have. And it's not wrong, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, that's how it was down there.
Yeah.
For you, when you took it over, and we're about a year or so in now, was there a conversation or something that tweaked your your mind or your feeling on it? Was it a conversation that you had to have at the family dinner table, so to speak, of, hey, we're going to start opening up the doors here and letting, not everyone, but letting people come in and either go out and experience other federations that you had a business relationship with, or bringing people in from other federations? Was there ever a conversation about that? And how did that call come about?
Yeah, so this was a conversation that Taryn and I had, and we had a lot of. As soon as I took over, I kid you not, like my messenger just flooded with people coming out of their woodwork and wanting to come back.
Yeah.
And then it also had a bunch of new guys, and people. When you're in a position of, I guess, management, when the spotlight's on the employee, they usually take a chance to slag someone else off. So I got a lot of messages of people saying, look, I'm so unhappy in this company that I'm in. I want to come over to you, blah, 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 blah. And so it really was full on. And so out of all those messages, I really sat down with Taryn and talked about it. And then we kind of, I wanted to keep it a family business. The people on my shows I trust with my life, sort of thing.
Right.
And that's what I do. And I still do that now. If you're on my shows and I trust you, and if I'm no longer putting you on my shows, and there may be a reason for it, or it could be that we're just overbooked. Because but with that mentality, Pete really didn't want me to have people from interstate or other companies come over, because he had horrible experiences with other Queensland companies. He brought guys from ECW over, and they really stiffed him on money, and he just didn't want me to get into that sort of business, because he'd seen how mean the business can be. But I took the risk, and I made some mistakes with booking certain people who ended up being a real handful, but a lot of them also are gems and underappreciated in wrestling. But I will always book my roster. If they're the worst wrestler in the world, I'm still going to try and train them as much as I can and give them that chance in the ring to display their ability. And because I want to look after them, I want to give them that self-confidence. And I think I get that from Pete. And I've been told flat out to my face that, that's not doing your company any favors. It's not doing your product any favors. And my answer is always, well, we're a family, fuck off, because that's how it is. I want to give everyone a chance. And so, I started building relationships with companies in Queensland. There's some companies that I didn't like we had one promoter hand out flyers of his own show at one of our shows, which was a big drama. Stuff like that I didn't appreciate. But at the end of the day, we're all doing in this for the same reason, and that's the passion of wrestling. So, I got to that stage and started using other people, and that was it. It started working out.
So was that something that you always wanted to do leading into the transition of the company, or was it something where you thought, hey, let's just try and see what happens here?
When I was just a person on the shows, when Pete was running it, I would call him out on it and say, why aren't you bringing so-and-so over there in town? Why can't one of our girls wrestle this girl who's from out of town instead of wrestling one of the guys?
Right.
And he really hated me for that. He really would go off at me for it. I remember having some really, really heated arguments about this sort of stuff. But one, it was my own naivety, because I wasn't considering in a cost factor with having people in. And two, it was Pete being, still stuck in the old way mentality and wanted to be around the people that he trusts.
Yeah.
So, it was give or take.
Because, Pete had been scorned quite a bit in the wrestling industry, not only from I guess coming up in the era where it was very much hard hitting thrash style in your face, the 70s and the 80s style of wrestling, which it was basically, I'm gonna make you bleed the hard way, and what are you going to do about it? Guys were quite literally scratching and clawing for their spots, as it is in all famed books and documentaries you read about it back then. A lot of the times those fights, depending on how you get along with people, sometimes they turn into a shoot, turn into a real thing in that ring, and then what are you going to do about it? So there were situations like that, and especially coming up through the 2000s, where I can completely understand that whole vibe of, hey, I don't know about letting more people in. Like, we got a good net of people here, and we're safe and it's secure. And hey, this is home. This is a family. The locker room's good. Everyone's nice here. I don't know. Opening that up to strangers. It's I don't want people to be influenced by this stranger. I don't want the stranger to influence them and take them away. So I can see both sides. But yeah, I can also see how that would lead to some pretty heated arguments at the proverbial dinner table, if you will. But
yeah. I'll tell you what, though. With the scratching and clawing to get to the top, well, the way Pete had it was, it was how he perceived us, not how the audience was reacting to us. It was how he perceived us in a realistic way. Did we look like we're in a fight?
Yeah.
Or did he resonate with the character that we were displaying? But with nowadays, it's, people are scratching and clawing in a different way. It's talking to the booker on Messenger, on Facebook, and trying to manipulate things behind the scenes with booking. So it went from fighting to politicking, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I prefer the fighting. I really do. And that's one thing that I miss about the old wrestling, was that we all just went out there, did our thing. We didn't go and complain to the booker or complain to one of the people in management about their spots on the card. We just went out there and did as best we could. And if we were given the heavyweight title, which you were, Flash, you were given the heavyweight title. I was given a position to be in that, to have that title. We earned it. We went out there and beat the crap out of each other, and it was competitive. I remember I was wrestling a match. It was a triple threat, and I was supposed to get speared through the ropes and fall onto the floor. And the people in the match knew this was a number one contender and knew that I was most likely going to win, and they weren't happy about it. So when I went to take my big bump and the other guy was supposed to catch me, he just sidestepped me, and I flew onto the floor, onto the concrete, and cracked my back, and my head slapped back into the ground. It was a hard bump. I used to have it on camera, awesome bump. But I finished the match, I won the match, and then I went on to win the heavyweight title. Yeah. And I felt, when I won that title, I felt like I really fought for it. And like when I won that heavyweight title, the guy I was wrestling, Nick Burns, is an MMA fighter. Every hit he did to you, like he nearly broke my collarbone with a drop kick. But he knew that he had to push me to be, on top of the card. I needed to display that athleticism. And when I won, I was that much happier. But nowadays it's, how you're conducting yourself, which is right, but also it's about politicking and being friends with the right people. And you've got to be really careful about how you book people, because it can't just be about your own perception of them. It's got to be how the crowd are reacting, how the boys in the locker room are getting along with that person. Is he setting a good example? Yeah. And both ways of doing things were wrong, but I just miss the achievement of doing something physical and winning it and feeling like you fought a war for it. You know what I mean? The grit of achieving it. Actually going through the paces and actually jumping over those hurdles and through those rings to feel like, oh man, what a journey. But hey, I sort of built it on my own steam rather than I asked nicely and sort of managed to talk my way into it. Yeah. Yeah. Though that is a mechanic that in certain times that does sort of rear its head more often than not. So I completely understand that, not only as a performer, but as a business owner now, that whole system must be something, if not a monthly, must come up for you a couple of months every year, that someone must have sort of go, hey, I've done this, and this. And it's like, oh, great. Well, I really appreciate you helping out the company, but that doesn't equal a championship. They a lot of the time it's I did you a favor, now reward me sort of thing. And it's I don't like that attitude at all. And
No, it's unnecessary.
if I get put in that position, I usually just smile and nod my head, and I've thought in my head, well, I'm not going to be rewarding that. So I watch how people do training and look after each other, and that's what I'm watching. I'm not looking to repay favors, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it is and that's just how it was. That's how it's always been down there, and that's how it should be in wrestling. It should be a thing of like, you work hard, you know, you get paid even harder, well, you get rewarded even harder. It should be. And that was something that was always drilled into me upon starting there. But for you now, you're a couple of years in to being the promoter now. You're also an active worker at the time as well.
Mm-hmm.
When does it reach the point where it starts feeling like to you, okay, I feel like we're on a bit of a groove here. Things are starting to sort of somewhat feel automatic each month. Like, I know this has got to be done. This has got to be done. This has got to be done. How long into that transition period did you feel like, okay, this is starting to become a well-oiled machine? Or was there still parts there that were starting to sort of rattle and shake and needed a bit more attention before you sort of got that groove and that mentality going?
I put a lot of energy into training.
Right.
With training our people, and preparing for the winter. You know what I mean? Preparing for, wrestlers moving on, which they do, whether they go to the States or Japan, or they've lost the passion for the business and leave, or whatever it is. You should always be building up wrestlers, and that was hard. That's really hard to prepare.
Prepare for them leaving? Because is it like a sudden thing, like they're going, oh, hey, man, I'm heading off to this place? Do they kind of tell you the week of, or do they give you a bit of notice?
Oh, no, they've always been there's this thing at training where there's a couch outside training, and usually when everyone's training, they'll say to me, one person will step out and like, hey, Josh, can I talk to you? And whether it's a personal discussion or whether it's about business, we'll go out and sit in that chair and have a chat. Right. And I think that's a really good thing to have, like a door's always open sort of mentality.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then that's when they would tell me, oh, look, I'm going to the States and so. Let's prepare this with the storylines or whatever we've got to do to prepare for them leaving. And so that's why it's always good to have a wild card. So someone on one of your trainees, you know, ready to step up onto the card because there's a vacancy. And so that was one thing that I do struggle with even now, is because so many people are moving around and about, or someone gets injured or whatever. You've always got to have a wild card and keep things fresh. Another thing is, just advertising, different ways of advertising, because the crowd keeps changing. Because like when WWE came out in 2018, it was so easy to get a big crowd to your shows because everyone was excited for WWE to be coming. And then when WWE leave, it gets quiet again. And so we've got to look for another avenue to get promotional material out there. So there's little things. I guess I call it growing pains, you know, like we're growing as a business. There'll be new obstacles, and juggling family life was hard for a little while. Yeah, I don't really know, to be honest. It was just one obstacle after the next, and you've either got to hit the nail on the head right away or learn how to deal with it, you know?
So, well, the thing is, too, is that specifically with federations and more focused on IPW at this point, that company started around the time when print media was pretty much the best avenue for advertisement for a wrestling show, whether it be in a magazine, newspaper, flyers. Yeah. I mean, some guys would maybe go on their local news and be like, hey, and speaking, and it would be very much a fluff piece at the end of the channel 9, 6 p.m. news. It would be like, and this dog learned to swim. Also, there's wrestling on. Good night. It would be a very much a fragmented, blink and you'll miss it kind of advertisement. Sometimes with radio as well, guys would come in, yeah, man, come in at 6 a.m. and have 10 minutes to advertise the show, and it's like, man, there's not who's okay. And it would be the day of, and it's like, oh yeah, so in 12 hours time I'll be wrestling down at this place. It's 4 hours away from this radio station, but that was sort of the avenues back then. That was the only way to advertise. And nowadays, and not every company, I did say, a lot of these companies were brought up in the days of print media, but a lot of companies now are starting to either begin or evolve into the era of social media. Like a lot of companies now will start and they'll already be the Facebook, there'll already be the Instagram, the Twitter, the Snapchat, whatever they want to use to advertise, hey, come and see us. And I don't know, I've always felt that although the social media and publishing posts and sponsorships and things like that are all very well organized and structured and targeted towards specific age groups and people that like their interests, depending on how much they've revealed on their social media, I feel like with wrestling is arguably one of the main forms of entertainment that will still thrive and to some extent still gain most notoriety and attention from print media. Like if I open a newspaper article or I see a magazine and a wrestling advertisement is there, be it a poster or a flyer or what have you, hell, man, about 80% of me wants to go to that. And that's not even me talking from the industry history that I've had. That's just saying like, oh, wow, it's something different in this magazine, this newspaper. Not a lot of other things can get away with that. Sure, you can advertise concert like, Elton John's coming, which, is a huge name. People go, oh, wow, didn't know he was touring. Things like that nature. But that's still, those ads are on TV, those ads are on the radio, those ads are on the bus stop, they're everywhere for those kinds of gigs. But for you as a business owner, do you think that given the fact that IPW was brought up during the era of print media and radio advertisement, do you still think those kinds of outlets still have a position in wrestling these days, specifically your company? Or do you think, hey, social media has kind of been the way to go?
I think, look, I do. If I had to give like a really brief response, I'd say yes, social media is the way to go. But I do see results with flyers, handing out flyers to people, going and talking to people face to face, especially going to Fates and the ECA or the markets or anything like that. Going and doing those things does build a rapport with the community. And I think that's what's great is we have one venue, that's Nerang, and that whole area knows who we are. That whole area knows when we're performing, and they all tell their friends and they all bring them along. And so we've always got a consistent crowd. So familiarity is really helpful because it does all the advertising for you via word of mouth. But yes, social media is the way to go because nothing else can reach the amount of people that social media can. I really struggle with understanding it. I get the IT guys that I have work for us in IPW. They really struggle with me because I don't know what the hell they're talking about. But like that's just how it is. And but really, like social media is the way to go. And like I think also making an appearance in the community is really helpful, and it does draw people in. Children are great, kids really light up when they see wrestling. And so we still do a lot of charity work, and that's not even for our crowds, but we always make sure that, the special individuals who, you can see have a real passion for the business, when they just see these guys in colourful outfits, when they light up. And so we have our regular fans, and we make them free customers because we can just see their faces light up. And that's about community. It's about connecting with your audience and trusting that they're going to be loyal fans and support us.
Yeah, no, that is one of the many strong suits that I've noticed with IPW is the fact that they have that. I wouldn't say a cult following because it makes it seem like it's underground and it's hidden and it's sort of whispered behind back alleys, like, oh, wrestling's on tomorrow. Like it's not a cultified business, but it does have that very loyal fan base. And whether it's because you've been in that area now going on 8 years, or whether or not it's the fact that it is just something where it is targeted for family fun entertainment, where a lot of the shows up and down the line will run the risk of running that close to, I guess, 18 plus adult kind of
Yeah.
aimed targeted market, which isn't a bad thing at all. But some of them do tailor to that, and that works for them, and that's fine. But IPW has always had that family friendly, fun night out with the kids kind of vibe. And for the amount of time that it's been in the ring, man, it's been thriving. It's developed a following, and yes, it does have now that wrestling based community, because a lot of people, and I'm sure you've experienced this now as a business owner, let alone a performer, is that a lot of families and a lot of skeptics, I would say, not so much in the industry, but people that know of the industry, and arguably, no matter who you ask, in some way, shape, or form, yes, they have a history with wrestling. Either it was watching it with the grandparents or seeing it on TV, but a lot of the times that history, it was kind of, oh, it was on as a kid and I've forgotten about it. You know, they don't really know it, but they have been shown it at some point in their life. What they've been shown is that old mantra of black and white guys in, you know, their swimsuit trunks or their tights, and you know, they've got their tights on, they've got their boots on, and it's black and white, or they're all oiled up and it's two dudes fighting, and it's that old sort of, you know, race call driver, and oh, here he comes, and wow, what a move. Like, it's very much a, oh, this. And then you try and do it in 2020 and go, yeah, come and see this. They have that image in their head. So now it's a case of, oh, do I really want to see this down at my local area, wherever the show may be at? But I can guarantee once they, whoever it is, if you have that community aspect and someone says, oh, yeah, and you see that flyer and, oh, you know, that wrestler looks a bit silly, odds are there'll be someone in that vicinity, whether it be in that community, that says, hey, I know what you're talking about. Nah, it isn't what you think. It is family fun entertainment. And, man, it is a good 2.5 hours of your night out.
Yeah.
Do you guys, because I know it is a community down there, and I know arguably a lot of the fans are very, very loyal, do you still suffer from that mechanic of people coming in looking a bit skeptic, but arguably a lot of the time them leaving going, wow, I was wrong, this is awesome, and then coming back the following months? Or is it a case of, man, everyone's just sort of more open to it now?
I think usually because it's a family thing and they're bringing their kids in, if they're, and 9 out of 10 times the kids are very much entertained by it all. They're watching the happiness on their kids' faces, and that's all that matters. And so I'm pretty sure that, like, most people who come in, 99.9% of people that come in are satisfied because they're watching their kids have a good time. And if it's just a couple going on a date, it's a bunch of guys in pink leotards throwing each other around that are carrying on like idiots. It's entertaining. And like, the only time I've had people say complain about the content that we've had on shows, it's because it's been too adult. So, you know, whether a wrestler's gone into business for himself on the microphone and said a swear word or referenced something sexual or, you know, stuff like that, that's when, you know, families complain. But also backstage, you know, you would have seen we've got, like, we call it gorilla position like WWE do. You know, we've got a computer set up and a TV, and I talk over the headset on what I want the referees doing and the announcers and all that. But it's a really cool setup. But sometimes I just take a risk, and if it goes into the edgy sort of audience stuff, sometimes there'll be backlash from it, and that's when I'll get, you know, maybe the odd little complaint or something like that. Right. But really, people, when they go to IPW, they're welcomed at the door. People chat to each other. We also have, like, a fan page where it's just for fans to talk about wrestling, and they're talking about their favorite wrestlers or their kids doing the Jesse Love dance or stuff like that. And again, that's working on maintaining that community, because it doesn't maintain itself. You've got to encourage it and get them to interact with each other. And and that's what wrestling should be all about, that 80s mentality. Yeah, it definitely should be, man, because that arguably is when it sort of transitioned from being
sport into the origins of what would become sports entertainment. It was during that sort of transitional phase of the 80s where it was these big, bright, colorful dudes. But then I think the not so much the over the top, but the melodrama and the storyline started to become a bit more colorful. It wasn't just a case of, he beat me up and this Saturday night at the local blah, 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 I'm going to come and be like, okay, cool. Yeah, that'll get the doors in. But this is a time when it's like, the Four Horsemen coming through and the Rock and Roll Express and things like that, where it's like, man, the Von Erichs and people of that nature going, man, these guys are coast to coast, town to town. They don't like each other. But hey, that was the storyline that they had. But it's funny that you mentioned, the kids are obviously the big target market of getting the families in because, probably the odds are the parents have said, what do you want to do on a Saturday night? Oh, I want to go and see wrestling. And I discovered that, especially with the kid fan base, when I was down there as a full-time performer, I kind of had that. I was speaking to someone about this the other day. It felt like a very much a pigeonholed aspect, which, yes, from a size perspective, no one on that roster could match me because I'm the only dude of my size on that roster at that time from the opposite end of the scale. However, at the same time, I had almost and I mentioned it just before, but in this aspect, it's kind of true. I almost had like a cult-like following from these kids because they took one look at me and they said, oh, he's like us. And there's no way you can explain to a kid, anywhere between the ages of 6 to 14, whatever it would be. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm not. They go, there you are, superhero. And that was it. That was just a case of, okay, that's what I am now. But yeah, they're very loyal, they're very loud, but they know what they like. And sometimes, you do have to push that envelope. I know many a times when I was working with Hawk, we tried to push that envelope a couple of times. Sometimes it worked. Hey, sometimes it didn't, but that's the break. Sometimes you just have to roll and see what works. Because sometimes the most detrimental thing in this business is staying stagnant. Just doing the same thing night after night, going out there, doing the same taunt, the same move, getting the same action, same result. And you go, yeah, but man, I wouldn't mind seeing this guy be put in this position in terms of a storyline. Or hey,
and do something different, yeah.
Yeah, but because of IPW's position where they are of the crowd aspects, sometimes, having the storylines and changing it up is awesome, and you can run that risk of maybe doing things a little bit more PG-13M rating, if you will. Obviously, you're not going to go for the R rating because it's a family show, but you can push that envelope and say, all right, let's take it to an M rating, see what we can do. Oh, they didn't like this, and this. Okay, let's take that out and let's sub it in with this and see how that goes. Great. We've received no feedback negatively from that. Okay, let's see how this far we can go with that. So wrestling's arguably one of those things where you constantly, if not at training, from a monthly aspect, you have to consistently put in the effort and evolve and remain as fresh and as new and as current as you can, because if not, you run that risk of being stagnant. Once it gets stagnant, hell, it becomes a very hard process to convince not only your fans, but the workers and hell, people from an outside perspective, no, it's fresh and new, I promise. And they come in and go, yeah, but last time I was here, that same guy was yelling out the same words and doing the same thing, had the same music. Oh yeah, but we have a new DVD out. Yeah, okay, but on that DVD, same guys, same music, doing the same thing, yelling the same words at the same opponent 6 months ago. So it is one of those processes that you have to sort of remain consistently, keep those wheels turning and wheels moving. Do you find that pressure each and every month now, or is it at that point now where, hey, everything's a well-oiled machine, we put in changes and we shift accordingly, but it isn't a process of staying stagnant. You've stayed at the same building now for 8 years, but that's not a bad thing. It's gotten that following. It's gotten that crowd numbers up. It's working for you guys. But creatively, is there a consistent shift and change each and every month to keep making it feel fresh? Or is it now in a position of, well, we'll make it feel fresh, but we'll adjust things if and where they need to be?
I think we should always have the audience have a hero. The audience should always have a villain. But you can change it around, make things fresh. We had Bojack. He had a mask on, which immediately means you're a face. Most of the time it means you're a face. And he had a huge following because he'd do lots of flippy stuff. and the crowd loved him for it, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I was wrestling his tag partner, Reaper. Right. And Reaper, I think I'd just given him a pile driver through a table and a bunch of other crazy stuff. He jumped off the roof. Anyway, like, we did all this crazy stuff. And he's having his comeback and he's about to put me away. And I wiggle my way out of it and try and get a bit more control. And Bojack runs down the ramp to save Reaper. And then he swerves and hits Reaper instead. Then Bojack drops to his knees and I put my hand over his face and take his mask off. And when the fans are all looking at him, they see these, I think he had black demonic eyes. He had eye contacts in. Yeah. And that was a huge shift change, like it went from the face of the company turning heel. It was like Hogan with NWO, But yeah, like he had a lot of fans and a lot of people would dress up as him and all that sort of stuff. And he wasn't champion. He was, in the undercard. But we risked it and started a tag team and worked as heels. We did the opening monologues sometimes at every show. And look, that was a huge gamble. And it could cost me money, but it kept people coming in the doors for about 2 months after it because they wanted to know why he would do this. Is Reaper going to get revenge? Where's Reaper? What's happened? And it gave Reaper a new edgy side of revenge, and Bojack this new side to be a psychopath. Yeah. So I think it's a good idea to keep things fresh. But again, you don't want to be heel turning every show or face turning every show, but you also don't want to. Another thing that people don't like is music getting changed every month. So a huge thing that I hate, and I know you don't like this either, and that's that wrestlers will go to a show and change their music every month. Yeah. But then you lose your whole pop. Yeah. The crowd don't know who the fuck you are. Like, so that's really frustrating. And there's time for change and keep things different. Like my character, it's R.I.P. himself. I'm sure we'll talk about that spastic later on, but he does something different every time he wrestles, and it may not be pretty, but I try and keep it so it's different and it's unconventional, and that's his character. That's why I do it. It doesn't always work. It may look like crap to the audience, but at least I'm trying to keep things different and spontaneous. And so like I think every show should have a real wow factor to it in different ways. And also like spotlighting in different divisions. Like I'm a fan of giving the middle card title. So, our version of the Intercontinental title, like the unified title, giving that the main event for the show because the feud building up to it has been so good. Giving people a different platform on our shows, and that's what keeps things fresh. And it gets people talking,
Well, I mean, you speak about fresh, and hell, you brought it up before, so now we're going to jump into it. Your character, R.I.P. I remember when he was first created, it was very much I thought of a throwback to the original graveyard, gravedigger. If you could think like Undertaker in the 90s, that very much torn up, dirty kind of look to Taker, where it looked like, hey, this guy's just come from a graveyard. It was appearance-wise, it was almost a nod to that kind of thing. Not so much the hat and the cloak and things like that, but the very disheveled, I want to say, kind of look to him. How much input did you have on this, or was this all generated via Hawk at this point?
Hawk would tell me what to do, like he did with everyone else. Yeah. When it comes to character, I remember like my first match. I'm like, oh, how am I going to look for this? Yeah. And Pete stuck his hand into this black paint, face paint, like a little tub of it, and then just slapped my face with it and just rubbed this black shit all over me. And it looked like I was cosplaying like an African American person or something. It looked offensive.
Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and I go out there and I wrestle a match and all this, and I have no idea what my character is, but he wanted me to find my own feet. He wanted me to be a shooter and go out there and beat the crap out of people, and I was very soft spoken and naive at the time and didn't know my spot, so I had to discover it myself. But with the paint, I remember coming into the dressing room, and the veterans all looked at me and started singing chim chimney, chim chimney, chim chim choo. So it was referring to me as a chimney sweep. And so I knew that wouldn't work. So I hated that. And so I addressed it with Hawk, and, you know, he wasn't happy about me not having black face paint anymore, but he agreed with it in the end. And so we just kept trialing different ways to get my character out there. And it took me a long time to find my feet. Like, I know I tagged with Scorn for a long time, about almost 2 years. And, you know, we wrestled a lot of crazy matches where, you know, people's mum would get into the ring and defend their wrestler son, and
Yeah.
we'd have to try and wrestle her out of the ring. I think someone's girlfriend got in the ring as well, and all sorts of crazy stuff would happen, and I got to learn my feet a little bit. And I remember one time we were doing a promo, and we were being referred to as, you know, bad guys and being dickheads and that. And then there was an awkward pause, like someone had forgot their line, what to say. And I remember I just snatched the microphone and I said, "What are you saying? We are lovely people. We are lovely people." And the crowd just thought it was funny. You know, we're all dressed in black and look like serial killers and referring to ourselves as good guys. They thought that was funny. And then so every now and then I'd make a little joke when I'm wrestling, or move a certain way to look hokey. And then Pete hated it. He hated the comedic style of my character. But what I kind of tried to change it as was a schizophrenic, because I work in mental health and I see this stuff every day, and it's not mocking them. It's trying to depict it in a way where it's like a character study, I guess.
Yeah. Like an awareness.
And so
like an awareness kind of thing.
Yeah. So like I've worked with gentlemen who their mouths would quiver when they're talking, or that their hands will shake at certain times when they're agitated and stuff like that. And I've kind of put that into my character. And I added that in first, and Pete didn't like it, but I was adamant that I was doing it. And he eventually started to see the funny side of it. And then I added a bit of Pete to it, especially after I took over. I added the way Pete would walk to the ring and in a slow sort of gorilla-like way, and also the way he would wrestle where he'd just beat the hell out of people. And so I tried to inherit that as well, but then adding a slightly agile sort of aspect to it as well. So that's sort of the character. And I always try and pick up new ways to portray that to the crowd. Like right now, the crowd are kind of supporting me because I'm on this journey of I'm trying to learn how to do a suicide dive. So every show I'm hitting the ropes and going to dive out, and then I hit the ropes and I bounce back into the ring, and the crowd go nuts, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm always the crowd are with me on that journey, and they're very much used to my character, and they're like, "Oh, this guy's a bloody idiot." And so then there was a storyline where I joined a cult and all this crazy hokey stuff. But you find that certain experiences you put in as a wrestler help develop your character.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know you better than anyone would understand that just a lot of your own character is a reflection of something that's a part of your life, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I started, it was kind of like a very much a backwards train ride, or it was like I was on the right track, but I was on the wrong train. Like I was starting to get out there, but I started out by impersonating WWE guys because, as I've mentioned in this podcast before, I didn't feel like I had a place in that ring, and I was only wrestling because the guy I was managing at that time had gotten injured, and it was a kind of a process where it was like, well, what do we do? And I had always sort of done these impressions at the end of training. We had like 10 or 15 minutes at the end of training back then where we're allowed to sort of
remember that. Yes.
free time. And I ended up, I think, pedigreeing one of the blue bags. They were doing the water spray or something. And Ash and another female wrestler at the time called Minx was there. And they thought it was the greatest thing. And they ran into that little office that Hawk had. And they brought him out and they said, watch this. And I did it. And Hawk chuckled and said, do you want to do that on the show? And I said, okay. And he goes, great. So show in 3 weeks' time, you're going to do that. What? Cool. All right, everyone out. And I'm like, what? Hang on, what? So it was a very much okay, well, that worked. Well, what are we doing next month? And he would call me up on the phone and say, who are we impersonating this month? And I said, he goes, who can you do? And I said, I could do Steve Austin. Great. You're doing Steve Austin. Goodbye. Click.
Yeah.
Once after that, Undertaker. All right, doing that. Click. And it was getting to the point where I think I reached January 2009, and a couple of months after that, the people that I had started with, Blaze and Fury, had gone, we're out of here. Yeah. And it was at that moment where I thought, okay, I can't do these impressions anymore. The guys I'm with, it was kind of like I'll do impressions and I'll come out with them. And, it was very much just a glorified comedy kind of situation to my character at that point. But yeah, there was a lot of times there, specifically when they left, where I was kind of like, okay, what do I want this to be? What's going to work and what's not going to work? And yeah, man, even up until this day, every time I go out there, I'm learning things that will puppeteer and get those emotions that I'm looking for, get those reactions that I need to supplement or credit to whatever situation that I'm working as, either as a face or a heel. But yeah, there's a consistent learning process, man, of, hey, this is going to work, and yep, definitely scrap that because that's not working out at all. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of times coming up with those characters where you think, this is going to change. I mean, hell, I had that red jumper for, God, close to, I don't know, what was it, 4 or 5 years I had that big red jumper.
It's part of your character, yeah. Yeah,
I think up until maybe up until close to the end of, or middle of the end of 2012, I had that jumper, and then something happened to it. I can't remember what happened, but I changed it up and had like a cape or something, like to play off the superhero thing. But yeah, I ended up working out a storyline with Hawk where it was very much like he was the mentor, I was the young guy coming up, and needed to be steered correctly on the path. I was getting too involved with the fans cheering me on. I was more excited about that than I was about the wrestling. And yeah, he brought me back from that kind of brink and was like, okay, you got to start wrestling and you got to start training. And ironically, 7 years later, I'm now doing that same thing with Chad Atlas down at IPW. So it is a very much I remember this, but now I'm on the other side. So, but yeah, there's a lot of times when the guys are coming up. And I used to say this to them as well, specifically in training, is that very rarely the character you start out with, the version of that character you start out with, is the one that you're going to end with.
Yeah, very rarely.
Because there's a lot of chop and changes, man. Like, but it's all about experimenting and getting that vibe and getting that sort of feeling and working out what you want to do. But bringing it back to the company now, you're starting to work out a bit of a transition period. You've got that solidified. The wheels are turning. Everything's starting to move. You've got a supportive network behind you. But just as things are starting to get on the right track here, just as things are starting to progress, the crowd numbers are up, the storyline's continuing. Hey, my character's feeling like he's got a position on this company. You're feeling like, yep, my character is R.I.P. This is working for me. All the other guys, all these elements are coming into play. You're starting to bring in people from outside. That's starting to gel. Relationships are starting to expand. Business is starting to expand. Social media is starting to expand. Then life at home changes. Now, I know there was a huge positive here because I remember many a times hitting up the local, I think it was a pub or a tavern. Now, Hawk was never a drinker, but he loved to gamble. He loves
Yes.
going on those pokies and gambling. But it was around this time, I want to say 2017, 2018 now. So we've got a couple of years under your belt as you're the owner.
It'd be
Hawk,
2016.
Yeah. Hawk has the biggest gamble of his life, and it comes up big. What happens? I'm sorry. I know. I hate to do it, but we had to do it. Don't fret, though. Every Wednesday, a new episode's coming out. So, the third and final part with Josh Ives, Impact Pro Wrestling Australia owner, will be out next week. And trust me, it is a part you do not want to miss. We get real personal, we actually get really deep, and we share stories that no one has heard before. Even me! I got told things I had heard before. So make sure you go back and listen to part 1 if you haven't. Catch part 3 next week. Hit up LMBC Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I'll catch you next week.